This is Rocky Snyder. At the tone, leave your name and message and I'll get back to you.
Think of your mind as a computer, because a mind, literally, it is programmed the way you are from the moment you are born, from the people you are around. They all tell you how to be, how to act.
Welcome back to another episode of the RockFit Files. I'm Rocky Snyder, and in the house today, I've got Selena Moon. Now, she's a master in human transformation, and I say that because she's got so many things that she has in her toolbox to help change lives. Whether it is the physical, the mental, the neurological, she runs the gamut on so many different elements to help people live better lives, happier existences, more complete. So without further ado, Selena, welcome.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's so great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Am I also, because just before we started recording, you were telling me about all the different things that you have been pursuing on your path to help others. And of course, we have that similarity where we both became certified as personal trainers and we worked ourselves through the ranks of, say, a health club and fitness club and different elements there. But no offense to personal trainers out there, but it can be a confining kind of title. And often for you and myself, it seems like it's a stepping stone to inspire us to learn more and to experience more. And I love how every individual personal trainer who pursues that kind of extension in their path, how different they are, and yet how many similarities they are. So before we get going, really tell me a little bit about this path. Once you were a personal trainer, where did that lead you?
Yeah, you make so many great points even within that. Personal training was something that I kind of just fell into, in all honesty. It wasn't something I ever planned on doing or something that I ever aspired to do. It was more just, I was a recruiter for personal trainers. And as a recruiter, I wanted to make sure that the people that I was interviewing actually knew what they were talking about. And the only way for me to know that is for me to learn it myself. So that's kind of how I got into it. I was just exploring courses and learning a little bit about things like fascial stretch therapy and exercise and program design. And, I took a TRX certification, and then I took the CrossFit certification, and I just kept going from there. And eventually I was like, you know what, I kind of just want to try this and see how it works on the side. So I pulled one of my admin assistants into the gym with me every morning at like 6 a.m. for like a few weeks. And he was getting better results with me than he was getting with his own trainer. And so it's like the recruiter is training me. And the word got out that, I had helped him lose all this weight, and he felt really great about himself. And he just looked very balanced in his gait and things like that. And a lot of people who were managers that I was hiring for were sort of asking questions and taking notice and things like that. And they were opening this like huge flagship club in downtown Toronto around where I was living. And the regional manager was stepping down to be like a fitness manager for that particular location, and asked the recruiter, who was me, if I wanted to go in and be one of his trainers. So I spoke to my manager about it, and she was like, obviously you're very good at this. You're getting all these awards doing recruiting, your board. So like, let's, because I always like to be stimulated. I think you probably have that going on too, or you just want to keep outdoing yourself, right? It's not about competition with others. It's more just like, I want to keep learning, right? It's like you want to.
Sometimes a cattle prod works really well for me, but otherwise inspiration is better than desperation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I was just really passionate about being able to execute everything that I learned in a way that was very different from how I was doing it just over, conversations and interviews in an office. It was like really just getting onto the floor and taking people through all these different exercises. And one thing led to another. I got really passionate about like, okay, wait a second, like, doesn't nutrition have a lot to do with this and things like that? And then next thing you know, I was studying this doctor in Germany. His name was Dr. Wolf. Fun fact, he created the metabolic balance nutrition plan, which was based on something that I was just like amazed. I'd never seen anything in North America like this before. I was married to a German at the time, so I was very interested in like German science and how they do things there, because everything feels so like proper, and it was just so proper. Like they would take 37 of your blood values, and we would send that to a lab, and literally the lab would have all these doctors and like compute based on what you needed and what you needed to get into a healthy range in every single one of your blood values, and literally just deliver entire nutrition suggestions based on diet alone, no supplements. It was just food, just a food only diet, but specific. So it's like you can have broccoli, but you can't have cauliflower. You could have red peppers, but you can't have green peppers. Like you could have these kind of peas, but you can't have these kind of peas. Like it was so specific to the individual. So I got involved in that. My clients started seeing amazing results, but I was starting to get, scrutinized because clearly I wasn't just training these people. There was something else going on. And I eventually had to go and do something with that, because in the corporate world, it's not allowed to be the nutrition person and the trainer, at the same time. And in where I was working, it was just not allowed. And I was also studying NLP, and NLP allowed me to be more of a coach for people. So I would like sometimes just realize that a lot of people who struggle with obesity, for example, dealt with personal issues that hadn't been dealt with, that were resulting in stress, that was creating more stress and disease in their body. So they needed someone to have like a conversation with. And I'd get in trouble for sitting in those back offices and having these coaching things because I wasn't allowed to as a trainer. So I just decided, I'm going to go start my own company. And that's
Well, so then your dormant kind of entrepreneurial energy that had been kind of percolating to the surface eventually blew the cap off of that volcano. So you opened up your own practice.
Yeah, because I wanted to be able to merge all the different elements of recognizing how the mind works, recognizing how nutrition works, and recognizing how the body works, all in one place. Like I didn't want to feel like I had to compartmentalize the information. And I felt like every aspect was so necessary. And it wasn't fair that I was being asked to just only focus on one thing when I'm like so now gifted and evolved, and I've been able to access all this really crucial and important information to help and support these people in their evolution. My results spoke for themselves through like my clients. I didn't really have to I didn't have to try to convince anybody that I was great at what I did. Everybody could see it for themselves based on who I was training and what their changes were that were so rapid and healthy. And so eventually it was just like, yep. I really want to help people. I really want to get to the bottom of why people struggle with certain issues. And that's how I ended up getting into psychosomatic therapy eventually.
Okay, now before we get to the psychosomatic therapy, because there's some really great stuff we can unpack with that.
Sure, yeah.
The NLP, for those listening and not familiar with that acronym or those initials, neuro linguistic programming, and essentially it is a way in which to really reprogram how you think and how you hold on to emotions that are attached to memories, and really redesign and redevelop your compass so that your true north is pointing in a completely, I'll say, a different direction than where it was. So if you're pointing in a direction where you're actually heading south and you're going downhill, then NLP has shown to be very effective in that. So how was it that you found yourself becoming a master practitioner of NLP?
Yeah, well, funny enough, because when I was working in the corporate world as a personal trainer, one of the ways in which I was able to get higher, like to be considered a higher level trainer, was to take an NLP class. And so it was something that I was recommended, even just in that regard. So I ended up going into it. It was like very shortly after I'd gone through a divorce as well. So I really needed something even just for myself to reorient myself and help myself see things more clearly. And when I was really into that, and when I did really well in that class, the teacher actually invited me to come back on like a scholarship and do my master's, because she said I was one of the best students. So
fabulous.
I ended up doing my master's. It wasn't something that I planned. It wasn't something that I always wanted. It was more just seems to be the story of my life. Things just kind of fall on my lap and we just go from there. Yeah.
And so this eventually led to the somatic work. And can you, in layman's terms, give an understanding of what the somatic therapy is all about?
It's recognizing that your body is your autobiography, right? So it's like really seeing how like everything about our shape and everything about the way that we look, the way that we feel, the way that where we store fat, the way that we walk, the way that where our muscles might be tight, this and that. It has a lot to do with how we see the world, how we perceive the world, has a lot to do with our emotions, has a lot to do with how we experience the past versus the future versus the present, has a lot to do with how we interpret our relationships with like the masculine or the feminine, has a lot to do with the way that we just store pain and emotional wounds in the body. There's so many ways to look at it. It's literally like an entire world in itself.
I
So
love that. And for those that are unfamiliar with this, it may seem like you know, fluff and this
yeah,
it's
yeah,
next she's going to spin crystals and burn incense and give me some kind of a smudging ceremony, when that's the furthest thing from
yeah.
really what we're talking about. I have a friend, colleague in Colorado, Galina Denzel, and
Okay.
she was on the podcast. She does a lot of somatic work, and
Oh,
one
cool.
thing that rang true with me that she said is that you could have injured yourself, say 5 years ago, and say you wrenched your knee. Well, your body is living in 2021, but your knee is still in 2016.
Yeah,
And it's reacting and behaving
yeah,
based on that injury. And we see it here all the time, where people are coming in with chronic or acute pain because of the way in which they're trying to manage their mass and kind of create a new strategy around a previous experience. And
yeah,
that's a physical kind of biomechanic experience.
yeah,
But you're also talking like a chemical experience, an emotional,
yeah,
psychosocial, or emotional. All these experiences
yeah.
are encompassed within us.
Yeah, exactly. And you articulated it so well, because essentially like our emotional experience does have a chemical impact and a biological and physiological impact. And I have a degree in biology, so I'm not completely alien to recognizing how the cells work and how the body works, at least in a general sense. So recognizing the connection between the mind and the emotions and the body, I think, is something that is highly undertaught in our culture. And I think it's important that we honor the way that we feel, whether we're man or woman, in recognizing how those feelings may have an impact, because it'll give us some cue as to how to move forward in a way that is much more balanced.
Well, here's the thing, too, Selena, is
Yeah.
that we are being conditioned to be lazy
Yeah.
as a culture.
Yeah.
We have every time saving and labor saving device. And pretty soon we won't even need to drive our cars ourselves. It'll drive itself. So we are just continually moving less and less and needing to exert effort less and less. And this particular approach, the methodology you're describing, requires effort. It requires investigation. So there's going to be some people that this just isn't going to work because I'm not willing
Yeah.
at this point in time to go through the work. But for those that are willing, that are inquisitive as to why do I keep having these patterns of behavior,
Yeah.
these patterns of pain, these patterns of poor relationships or gut issues,
Yeah.
you can explore this.
Right, exactly. Because what happens is that our cells literally store memory, right? So, like when we're 5 years old, right, and say something happens to us that we perceive when we're five is something really bad, like maybe like something of value to us breaks, right? Like now in hindsight, we'd look back and be like, oh, no big deal. Something broke when I was five, right? But when you're five and you see something break and it literally crushes you inside and it forms a false belief system, it can literally cause some kind of like imbalance in your emotional body and your physical body if that doesn't get checked, right? And that's how we get accumulated issues over time, is that we're not learning how to check what it is that's been thrown off so that we can get back into balance. And so we're all walking around with these like false protective security based belief systems that are based on a very scarcity impoverished type of life that puts us in a place where we're not thriving, we're not seeking more stimulation to expand ourselves. Like you said earlier, it's like really about coming into our true north and really getting clear with what is our true north. But how can we know what our true north is if we're still carrying XYZ from when we were 10, 14, and 18 in our bodies, right?
It's truly, and it's fascinating. And you may speak of an emotional event that is trapped in as a memory, but that also dictates the physical positioning of the body as well. And
Yeah.
we can just simply just kind of shuffle it off and say body language, but or posture. But in truth, there's so much more to it. You can
Right.
tell so much about a person
Yeah.
just by the way they manage their mass against gravity, how they hold themselves when they're standing or sitting. And it's kind of a fun little exercise that I often do,
Yeah.
not to try and be uh, all knowing, but just
Right.
trying to be inquisitive. Like
Yeah.
as I see somebody stand, what do I notice about them as a person as they
Yeah.
stand there, rather than looking them from a structural or physical perspective? Can you get a sense of who that person is? If,
Right.
for instance, like I notice when people feel like they have more weight in their heels,
Yeah.
it could be that they're in some ways more anchored, more stubborn to move forward, as simple as that might be. Or if
Yeah.
somebody is kind of on their toes and their heels are coming off, boy, they are ready to pounce, or they're ready to move, and they're going to act before they think almost.
Yeah.
You start playing around with that. And I'm sure you start to see that with your clients,
Yeah.
that you start to see not patterns, but you begin to understand the person before even words come out of their mouth.
Yeah, definitely. Like it got to a place where it was almost so instinctive that it became intuitive. And so when I veered even away from that, it wasn't because, it wasn't because I was like not able to see people anymore. It's because I was able to see people at such a micro level that I actually just stopped needing to even look at the chemistry or the mechanics of the body anymore. And that's when I started doing my work online, because it was like, okay, I don't really need to see your body anymore. I can literally just feel what's going on, and I can sense it, and I can just literally tune into, okay, you have a stomach ache. Like, let's see what emotion is stored in there. Let's see what historical experience is stored in there. And let's get to the root of that and just release that. Right. And it's so simple. It's ridiculous. Like if people knew how simple it was to just focus on something and just do something as simple as like breathe through it, like that could release, like I've had people who were infertile become fertile from just little things like that. So
Amazing.
tumors gone from the body, like ulcers shrinking, all kinds of like what people would say miraculous experiences people had physiologically by just literally pulling attention towards something that was hard to cope with at a particular time in our lives and just breathe through it.
Yeah, there's so much we don't yet understand
Yeah.
about the brain,
Yeah.
about the body.
Yeah.
In fact, just 2 years ago, we found an organ that had gone on undiscovered, and it's the interstitial tissue below the skin between the muscle and so on, that would always lose its liquid as soon as it was cut into. So anytime there was dissection, it would be something that disappeared. So never did we know about that. And it's just one example. Like we know more about the brain in the last 5 years than all the information gleaned on the brain in the history of man up to that point. So when we start talking about these things, it may seem a little bit ethereal and out there, but actually, like you say, Selena, you've got a background in biology. I mean, this is fundamentally founded in the realm of science. It's not metaphysical. It is actually, in the physical realm.
Yeah.
So I'm interested. You say you switched over to online. Was
Yeah.
that during our COVID season, as we call?
No, actually, this is like I think it's my fourth year now working online. So COVID didn't really affect me too much in that respect, because had already, I had ran about 200 workshops in the Toronto area. And I actually did one in California as well a couple of years ago. But, it's just, for me, it was more so about just being able to recognize that like, I can just do the work in such a way where it's simple and people don't have to leave their homes, and it's just as powerful. And it just gave me the freedom to go anywhere I wanted to go, because I kind of became a little bit of a nomad. So I would move somewhere new every 4 months. And it just gave me the flexibility to live that life. And people had already built trust in me, and we'd established a connection. And, I had a lot of like radio shows that I spoke on and podcasts. And like I said, I ran over 200 workshops. I worked with a lot of like chiropractors and things like that. So it was even functional medicine doctors. I've spoken at functional medicine doctor masterminds and things like that. So, I mean, it just kind of gave me a really great opportunity to just take everything online. So,
Well, one thing that was very interesting that you mentioned about going online was how you didn't necessarily need to be in the physical presence of the person. And I think when we lose one sense, we gain acuity in
Yeah,
another sense,
I
right? So,
agree.
so somebody that may lose their sight may get very good at their hearing and their sense of touch, perhaps. But
Mhm.
I'd say the same thing is occurring here, because the work that I do, I
Yeah,
have clients online and I am watching how their body moves.
yeah,
And it feels like in the last year, especially, that the skill level has increased, or my ability to see,
yeah,
better yet, the
yeah,
ability to see has improved and
yeah.
got more fine tuned than if they were in my presence, where I have all these other senses that I could be utilizing.
Right. I totally agree with you. It's almost like I just call it intuition now because like I really do believe that it's gotten to a point where it's intuitive. But it definitely did not start off that way.
Well,
So,
it's interesting. You use the word intuitive, and I know that for some people, that's another one of those words that you're going,
right.
"Oh my gosh, she's like
A
a
woo-woo
intuitive
person.
healer," or something like that. But the word intuition is interesting. If you ever read the book Blink, and
Yeah,
in Blink, it's basically, the premise is we accumulate so much information unknowingly
yeah,
in our lives,
yeah,
and that gets stored,
mhm,
and we can process that information in the subconscious, to some
yeah,
degree, or the unconscious mind,
yeah,
and then try to transfer it into our conscious.
yeah.
And sometimes we can do really well, at other times it's just this kind of feeling that we have, right, that, like,
Right.
and so we call it intuition, when in fact most intuition is based on information you've already acquired. It's just a different way of processing it and trying to get it out.
Yeah, it's a really interesting statement that you make. I made a video about this once. I never ended up publishing it, but it was very similar to what you just explained, where it's like, intuition is like a muscle, and it's also got a series of other muscles attached to it. So if you're really exposed to something often, like if you're a driver and you're always on the road and you always take these particular roads and you know your car really well and you have a sense of what goes on with respect to traffic and weather and this and that, you'll just sort of know, like, okay, I'm not going to take that road today. I'm going to take that road. And then maybe you'll find out that that road you didn't take, there was an accident, and you won't know how you knew that, but your exposure, consistent exposure to it over time, I think is the information you're referring to in this example,
Yeah.
right? It's like that just getting that a lot of information in one particular domain gives you like it almost gives you an advantage to become very like, I just call it like micro senses. It's like having micro senses. It's not like the most overt way of saying, oh, this smells like a rose. This smells like cinnamon. This tastes like ice cream. It's more like I just sense and I feel something on a very like micro level, and I think we all have that. I think there's an issue with how we perceive metaphysics versus how we perceive the physical world, because there's not enough people talking about the gap between the two. And so people who go into metaphysical, like they seem to just kind of go off in one really extreme domain, and it becomes very impractical. And I'm really personally not a fan of that. I think that, everything that I work with in the metaphysical world has to have a practical application to it. Otherwise, I just think it's a bunch of useless information personally, because I like to apply things practically. Not everybody does, but that's just sort of my cup of tea. But the same is true for the physical world, that there are metaphysical implications in our physical world that have an emotional effect. And it's something as simple as like, hey, when I work out, I feel happier. Like feeling happier could be considered a metaphysical experience, right?
Yeah, no, well said. I like that. Now, one thing I neglected to do at the beginning of this
Mhm.
show was to acknowledge that you are one of the contributing authors to The Successful Body, the book that has just been recently released. And for those that haven't got a copy, here's your chance now. If you follow me on Instagram, Rocky_Snyder, Snyder, and you do that this week that this show is airing, I choose one of those new followers and out of the group and send you a copy of The Successful Body. So there's a little plug there. But Selena, I want to know what did you speak of? What did you write about in the chapter that you wrote?
That's a great question. Ultimately, I wrote about our different emotional experiences and how they affect us physiologically. I gave some examples of clients and things like that. And I also offered some affirmations that could be used in particular cases where people might be struggling with things. So, for example, like a lot of people struggle with lower back pain. And lower back pain is known to be associated with like a feeling of lack or lack of security, lack of finances, lack of feeling a sense of like belonging in some way, shape, or form. And so if you are to tell yourself that, you know, I'm financially okay, everything's going to be fine, we're stable, we're secure, like literally speaking to the cells of your body, because our cells are just consciousness as well. So our cells can literally work off sound frequency, which is why the sun is so powerful as well, because the sun is actually a sound frequency. We can't hear it with our ears, but it vibrates at a certain level that does have a sound to it. And our cells are also capable of absorbing those frequencies. And so when we speak, especially our own voice to our own self, what we're doing is we're sending commands to our body. So if you keep saying someone's a pain in the neck, you're going to have a pain in the neck eventually. You know, it's like, I'm bending over backwards for everyone. It's like, eventually you're going to feel like your back hurts. You keep saying these things, it'll have an effect on the body, because what we say about our body is a command to the body, because we think that we're body parts. We think that we have a pinky and we have a toe and we have a kneecap and we have a shoulder, but it's all one. It's all part of us in a holistic way. And because we're so compartmentalized in our ability to perceive even ourselves, it's very hard to understand this concept for people. So I was just breaking it down in the chapter.
So with those affirmations, is it okay to use a negative phrase, or is it always positive? Meaning, like an example would be, we'll bring up financial insecurity.
Sure. Yeah.
You can say that I don't have a problem with money.
Mm.
Or is that that negative kind of connotation something that would not be as effective as creating a mentality of, I am responsible with my finances, I am going to flourish in the economic world?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to that question, but I'll answer it because I know you're saying it for the audience. It's definitely important to have you know, a positive like an affirmation that is in the positive, because our brain, according to NLP, doesn't process negatives. So if we keep talking about what we don't want, we're going to keep getting it because we're talking about that thing. You know, whether we don't want that thing or we want that thing, the focus is on that thing. So when we're affirming whatever that thing is, whether it's in the positive or the negative, that's really what we're creating in our reality, because we don't have an ability to know the difference between don't want and want in that space. It's the thing that we focus on.
And do you attach NLP with a physical motion or action? You mentioned breathing, so I know that's physical, of course, but
Right.
are there other kind of movements or anything like that?
NLP wise, you know, it's funny you asked that, because I was taught. However, I was actually thinking about creating an entire program using NLP movements in exercise programming ways to help people to put the two together. So I remember, like, there was a time where you probably worked with kettlebells before, right?
Sure.
Okay. So like, you know, you have like 3 different kettlebells, right? And you have like, let's just say heavy, medium, light, right?
Mhm.
And you attribute something really heavy in your life, like something that you feel very heavy in your life. Like, say you feel like, oh, this issue just feels so heavy, and you attribute it to the light kettlebell.
Aha.
You know, and then you attribute something medium to the medium one, and something very, very light in your life to the heavy one. And you have a person go through an experience such as swinging or clean and pressing, or, you know, just doing deadlifts or whatever with them, and see how that person's mind changes as a result of putting some kind of meaning and situation to every one of those kettlebells in that experience. And I think, you know, that's how I would use NLP if I were to attribute it to an exercise program or something. But in terms of one movement, not necessarily. There's so many ways to use it.
I imagine, just like when it comes to food selection, and you mentioned that you followed a German methodology. Is that something that you continue to follow, or has that morphed into or completely changed into something else?
No, I didn't continue to follow it, just because once I discovered psychosomatic therapy and the effect that emotions has on people, I was able to find a lot more success with my clients, just working in that realm. Because naturally, like they would just, their bodies would change as a result of releasing. So sometimes, like you work against yourself. I find if you're just like on a diet and it's not, you're still going through all this stress, like you're going to plateau. But sometimes it's just a situation from your childhood or like your job or your relationship that actually needs the tweaking. I've seen people get out of a relationship and lose 60 pounds without changing anything about their diet.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, because really, I mean, I'll say the brain, but the nervous system, especially the brain, we can't live without it. It is
Yeah.
the governing body of all that we are. We
Yeah.
can go without a limb, we can go without a stomach, we can go without a heart. There's so many things that we have found ways to go without, but
Yeah.
we have yet to find a way to exist without a brain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me that this is where your path is going, because it's
Yeah.
kind of the same where my path is going, into motor neurology. And
Okay.
knowing that by getting the brain to receive, interpret, and respond to stimuli in the most appropriate and efficient way,
Yeah.
good things have a way of happening.
Absolutely. I agree with you for sure. I would love to introduce you to someone as well that I met in Nelson, BC, who took me through a series of movements by tapping and speaking affirmations into those particular aspects where my muscles weren't firing and things were really tight and very like intricated and just really buckled up. And he would just tap in these particular places and have me do very, very micro movements, type movements. And he would just repeat certain affirmations, and like literally within seconds, things would just release. Like it was, I've never seen it applied on anyone before, especially myself, in such a way. So that to me was like fascinating.
It sounds it. It sounds it. So, with all of the amalgamation of approaches that you've been learning,
Yeah.
where is it that it is inspiring you to go? You're already obviously with NLP, and but what is it that you're pursuing these days? Because it doesn't seem like you're satisfied with knowing what you know.
No, it's not enough for me. It's just, I like to keep expanding my knowledge, and I like to keep going in places that really challenge my mind and allow me to work with people in more and more productive and efficient ways. And one thing definitely that moves my soul and really brings satisfaction to me is the experience of working with other people, because I'm sure you know about mirror neurons, right?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So like when we have an example of something, or we initiate an example of something and embody an example of something, and we witness other people in the room doing it as well, we naturally create a completely new neurological pattern within our bodies and our minds. And when we leave, we actually leave as almost feeling like different people than we were before. And so what I love to do is I like to bring groups of people together. I know it's not the best time right now, but ultimately that is sort of the goal. If I had a goal, is to be able to bring groups of people together and to invoke emotion through movement and see what happens in terms of people's gaits and their bodies and and just their structural mechanisms, and how that affects their health in the long term. And I think that's something that just blows my mind, because it's a very conscious experience that you induce in the body just by way of command and request.
Well, you bring up another great topic, which is the topic of awareness,
Yeah.
right? And I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the clients that really thrive are the ones with a heightened level, or they develop a heightened level of awareness. And for those that, whether they're capable or willing
Mhm.
or unwilling, those that stay unaware are the ones that aren't going to experience very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because most of us have been taught to dissociate our mind from our body, right? So,
Right.
like when we go places, even if we're exercising, a lot of people are just exercising in their head, even if they're moving their body, right? And so, like it's almost sad that our school system and our even just general education has not taught us to live inside of our bodies. It's almost conditioned us to live in a very mental space where we're always very thinky. And I think that it's hard to be aware of your body in those cases. And that's why people get sudden injuries and things like that, because they're not actually paying attention to what their bodies are saying. If you look at pregnant women, all of a sudden they didn't even know they were pregnant. Next thing you know, they're having a baby. It's like, how can that happen unless you're not connected to your body?
Yeah.
You know, how can you even go through life just, you think everything's an accident that happens to you. You literally believe everything that happens to you is an accident when you're not connected to your body, because what's being shown to us in these subtle ways, right? It's like, oh, something feels like interesting around my shoulder, and you don't pay attention to it. You don't really give it any sort of like movement or like have a conversation with it through breath work or attention. It's probably going to result in some form of greater injury in the future, that you're going to say, oh, it was just an accident, I fell and whatever. And that's what most people will say, is that, you know, it was an accident. It's never an accident.
Okay, I've got a very heavy question to ask,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it was just been inspired by what you say.
Okay.
And in all truth, as kind of people in the health fitness world, I feel like we're failing as an industry.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because the levels of chronic pain, obesity,
Yeah.
disease led by lifestyles is forever increasing. And I heard recently by 2030, 90% of Americans will be overweight or obese.
Wow.
Currently, we're at 70%. So it is increasing at a very alarming rate. And here we are with a small percentage of the population trying to hold back the tide. So what do you see in our industry? Like, what are we not doing?
Yeah. I don't think it's an industry issue. I think it's an actual, it's a pathological cultural issue, if I can say that. And I just feel like it's a lot to do with the way that we feel about ourselves as people. You know, we're living in a society where most people are conditioned to be slaves in some respect. You know, they're conditioned to follow some system, or to, you know, make money to survive, or to like go to school to get grades and study their butts off in order to be able to like, you know, pass school, or to be able to memorize some kind of information they have no interest in order to be considered an educated person so they can write an exam. Or, you know, there's so many ways in which I feel like this, like, the American people are confined in who we are as people. And I believe that when we feel confined, we feel scarce. And when we feel scarce, we store and we want to protect, right? It's like our body goes into a very security, like I need to hold on to everything that I have, because I don't know if I'm going to lose it. Right. And I think a lot of people live their lives feeling that way, whether it's financially or even just with love. Like love is like a basic thing that everybody needs, but we're not taught how to love each other. As sad as it is, we're not really taught how to have proper human connection. You know, there's a lot of sad things that go on, and with men and with women. You just even look at the Me Too campaign and how that affected men and how that affected women in different ways. But it just shows that, you know, that we have an issue that's much deeper than just eating. You know, it goes beyond, because when you know how your body feels, you know, when you eat a burger, you don't feel good. But if you're so disconnected from your body, you'll eat 20 burgers and still not feel good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like, yes, the diet and the exercise are a factor, but what's creating that behavior? You go to the root of the problem, and there's a serious issue in the way that I believe that Americans feel within themselves. And that feeling, that propagation of that feeling, is resulting in a disconnection between their real bodies and their minds. And therefore, it's creating a series of addictive behavior patterns and sedentary lifestyle that can create, I think, all kinds of issues in the body, not just
So
obesity.
with this,
Yeah.
everything that you said, it
Yeah.
seems like you could do this in a group of people, that it doesn't necessarily have to be exclusively an individualized approach. So my
Absolutely.
question is, are you?
That's a great question. I've never thought of working with obese, you know, with just like a whole group of obese. I don't even like to say obese people. It sounds so wrong. People who
Yeah.
struggle with obesity. It sounds like a label, which we talked about earlier. Just not
Yes,
a big fan
exactly.
of labels. But yeah, people who struggle with obesity, I think, that's a great idea. Thank you for suggesting that, because it isn't something that I've actually actively done and thought to do. And also because like, I think that to get inside your body, there's a lot of like touch and like very like kinesthetic things that need to happen to awaken the body, right? So it's like, if I were to tell you right now, focus on your big toe, like you'd be there in a heartbeat because you're so in your body.
Uh-huh.
Like you're so present. I can see that you've got like you're so inside of your body. You can literally feel your entire being just breathing as one. You're not separate from it, right? But if you're speaking to a group of people who struggle with obesity, they've disconnected from their ability to do that. So most obese people that I worked with one-on-one couldn't tell their elbow from their kneecap.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know the difference. Like it's almost like you have to retrain the brain to tap. This is the elbow, this is the knee. Okay, now move the elbow. Okay, now, because it's so separate. It's literally like two different entities in people who struggle with obesity. So for me, it's like something that I would love to do if I had the opportunity to work in person and use tapping mechanisms and actual physical movement and patterns that are done in a classroom setting that would give these people the opportunity to make that mental physical connection. Because just doing it over Zoom in a case like this, it's not going to create that for them.
Certainly, I can appreciate that for sure.
Yeah. But it's a great question. Yeah.
Well, you never know how little flakes will start an avalanche sometimes. But
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if people want to, as we're getting near the end of this show, I love giving people an opportunity to find out more about the guests and how to connect with them. So what is the best way to contact you, Selena?
Yeah, honestly, I just would love to hear from anyone who has questions or wants to connect through email. My email address is the Selena Moon Project at gmail.com. I know it sounds complicated, but it's really not. Everybody knows that word. Selena is spelled Selena, Moon, just like the moon, MOON project at gmail.com. And yeah, if you guys want to reach out and connect and see what's going on with you, if you want to book a one-on-one session, or if you have a group of people that you want to bring together, let's play and see how we can support people at this time. Everyone's going through so much and dealing with so many different things right now that I'm just in service.
Very good. I'll make sure all the description is below, as always, with these podcasts. And I can't really, honestly, I can't thank you enough for being on. And remember, if you're in the listening audience and you want a copy of The Successful Body, which Selena contributed to, just follow me on Instagram, Rocky_Snyder. And this week I draw one name out of the hat and we'll send you a copy.
That's so exciting. It's a great book. Such great authors.
It's a lot of good content. I'll tell you that. Good
content and good people. I've met so many of the authors from this book, and it's just astounding to me how they all just have such great vibes, and everyone's so just in this very zen and very energized place. Everyone's very positive and optimistic. I haven't met a single author that wasn't like that.
Well, it seems like you're right in the center of that group too. I can't thank you enough for coming on, Selena. This has been great. And I look forward to when our paths actually cross in person sometime down the road.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
And that's it for another episode of the Rock Fit Files. Thank you, Selena Moon, for coming on and having a great conversation with me. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on our weekly episodes. Next week, we're going to have another contributing author to The Successful Body. Be sure that you follow us on Instagram, Rocky_Snyder. This week, I will, again, choose a name from the followers to send a complimentary copy of The Successful Body to. We'll see you next week.